third POV. And welcome back, sports fans. Sorry for the delay, as we finished cleaning up after last match's chilly ending. Still got me shivering. Present Mike announced, as a wide shot of the field showed the last of Todoroki's ice melting away or discarded by Cementos. And as a quick recap for all you fans that may have missed out this second round of matches, we seem to have quite a few themes going on with speed versus strength. The screens showed a few captured shots of Izuku's fight against Ida and the former's victory. And last match we had a quick one with a girl who could send you to space and a guy as cold as it. A recap showed the quick fight between Uraraka and Todoroki, this one ending in the latter's victory. But now, we move on to the third match of the second round, and the themes just keep on coming. Mike directed his attention to the field as the two newest combatants arrived. In one corner, we got the girl who checked me the last time she was up and still got that shining light about her. It's Class 1, B's Holy Maiden, Ibra Shiozaki. My sincerest apologies still for my rude interruption, Ibra muttered. And in the other corner, we got the stoic warrior, whose two opponents in one avian package. From Class 1A, it's their dark bird, Fumikage Tokoyami. Mike presented the other fighter. Tokoyami said nothing as he stood there with his arms crossed.
Huh.
Go Shio. Show that birdman who's boss. Setsuna cheered. Defeat him, Shiozaki. Monoma got up from his seat, waving and flailing his arms dramatically. Show the world the superiority of our class by knocking one down from their pedestal. That's enough from you, Itsuka said as she karate chopped the top of Monoma's head.
Arg. Kendo.
What was that for? Monoma groaned, rubbing his head. Tokage is spared from your harsh treatment and I don't. Tokage was supportive of her classmate for her sake. Itsuka didn't bother looking at Monoma as she crossed her arms and lifted her chin in her defense. You, however, only did so to prove a point against 1A. Enough with this grudge of yours and sit back down. Monoma gaped at her with a look of audacity, turning to look at Setsuna, who stuck her tongue out at him. Literally in this case, as her tongue floated out of her mouth. Though, when Kendo raised one of her hands, Tokage slipped the tongue back into her mouth, and the hand lowered once more. That's right, folks. It's time for the age-old battle of dark versus light. Which one of these forces of nature will come out on top? Mike declared as Midnight raised her hand. Ibra's vine hair began to move while dark shadow creeped out of Tokoyami. Let the match begin. As Midnight lowered her hand, Ibra's vine shot out toward an advancing, ever-growing dark shadow. Their clash began as the hands made of vines and shadows collided together. As they fought, the Dika squad had since returned to the stands of Class 1A. They had wished to stay in Recovery Girl's room to look after Mina, but were dismissed by the elderly nurse. She claimed that staying around hovering over her won't do any of them any good except worry themselves needlessly. Reluctantly, they left their pink friend to the care of the nurse and the watchful protection of her Pokemon, who wouldn't budge. Not that the nurse intended to. Come on, Tokoyami, avenge me. Kaminari cheered for his classmate. Restore my honor and knock her out of the field. Gently though. Wow, real concerned about Shiozaki there. Siro grinned mischievously at him. Even after your match? Well, yeah. I mean, it would be pretty unchivalrous to wish harm upon a beautiful lady. Kaminari flipped some of his hair, flamboyantly. That's why I went easy on her in our round. She totally annihilated you, Kaminari. Ajui retorted blankly, a cloud of comical depression crashing over Kaminari's head. Quit acting all pompous, Spolts for brains. Kyoko rolled her eyes, sticking her thumb to the side. We already got enough with Aoima over there. We don't need to flamboyant turds. Aoima whirled his still smiling face in mock aghast at the purple-haired girl. I wonder how Uraraka is doing? Hagakure pondered. We must have left before the staff bots brought her. She only knew that she was being delivered by the robots, as they saw her being carried away shortly after Todoroki freed her from his glacier. I wouldn't worry too much, Ida reassured her, freshly dismissed from the recovery hero with a full bill of health. She likely just needs to heat herself some more, and she'll be fine. By the way, guys, where's Midoriya and Serena? Ojiro asked the group, noticing the former's absence despite his Pokemon all arriving with them. Wasn't he also with you guys getting checked out by Recovery Girl? Recovery Girl healed up Zuka's fingers already, thanks to a little help from Evie, Momo replied, Evie on her lap. But he stuck around to wait for Uraraka. Serena stayed with him as well. They must still be there with her right now. Evie looked to Pikachu, Combuskin, and Froke, all four of them knowing their trainer was worried for the auburn-haired girl. They silently agreed to listen in on their psychic connection to their trainer and would make no effort to talk unless he did so himself. Meanwhile, Izuku and Serena stared surprised at the girl in front of them. Man, I lost too bad. Uraraka whined playfully, rubbing the back of her head. Izuku and Serena blinked repeatedly in disbelief. After the group left for the stands again, Izuku and Serena found Uraraka being carried into Recovery Girl's room by the staff bots. The nurse had them wait outside while she looked her over. After a few minutes, Uraraka came with a thick pink blanket over her body. Yet despite her recent match, the pink-cheeked girl looked as chipper as ever, as if nothing happened. Both Izuku and Serena were rendered mute in their surprise at how unfazed Uraraka appeared and continued staying that way till they reached Uraraka's room where they were met by her worried Pokemon. But just like them, Uraraka likewise stunned her Pokemon with her upbeat mood. Hey, are you sure you're okay, Ochako? Izuku questioned, his face still filled with concern. Yeah, you didn't get a screw loosened with all that cold, right? Serena jumped in, likewise concerned. You were literally half buried in an iceberg. Oh, no need to worry. Ochako waved off their concerns sweetly, wrapping more of the warm blanket around her. Recovery Girl's Pokemon warmed me up enough and gave me this blanket. Told me to keep this on for a while and constantly move, and my body will heat myself right up. Uraraka gestured to this by wiggling her feet and fingers. Oh, that's good. Serena sighed relieved. Take it from me, that stuff is freezing. You got that right. Jeez. That Todoroki. He froze me instantly. Uraraka whined, waving her fists half frustrated, yet still holding a chipper air to her. It's so unfair just how powerful he is. Uraraka stopped as she noticed how Izuku and Serena looked at her with deadpanned expressions. You sure that you're okay? Izuku asked again. I'm starting to agree with Serena that you might be delirious. Oh, I'm alright, Deku, really? I am. Uraraka insisted, smiling at him. Yeah, it was a tad bit humiliating losing that fast, but I'm handling it better than I thought I would be. Serena noticed how one of Uraraka's hands trembled a bit, and she knew it wasn't from the cold. She's putting up a brave face, but clearly, she's still upset about it, Serena thought, frowning while her gaze gazed down, her mind turning back. She recalled her match with Todoroki and how she could have knocked him out of the ring but spared him. If I didn't, we would have faced instead, and she could have won easily without any water for me to use. I am sorry, Uraraka, Serena exclaimed, suddenly bowing down to the surprised auburn-haired girl. Because of me, you had to face Todoroki. You could have made it farther if I hadn't thrown my match. Serena's opened her slowly wetting eyes that were filled with guilt. You suffered because of my actions, and please forgive me. Serena. Izuku stared at his best friend sadly, guilty himself for never noticing how troubled by this she must have been before. Uraraka stared at Serena with wide eyes before they softened and smiled sweetly at her. Hey, what are you apologizing for? You don't have anything to be sorry about. Uraraka's words had Serena look up slowly, a tear rolling down Serena's cheek. Even if you did win against Todoroki, it wouldn't be a fair fight for you if I could use my quirk without you yours. It wouldn't really be satisfying. I would have wanted more to lose against yours or Todoroki's quirks than win an unfair match. Serena wanted to argue that Uraraka's match against Todoroki was anything but a fair matchup, but noticing the pink-cheeked girl had more to say, she remained silent. Besides, Uraraka paused, bringing her phone up to her chest, a thoughtful look added to her sweet round eyes. Even if I lost, either to you or Todoroki, it just means I got to train harder. Even if you lose, you always look to what is next. In a way, I'm glad that I lost. It just shows I have more to look forward to. Uraraka looked to Serena, raising her hand out to her. So, please, don't feel sad or guilty over me, Serena. Uraraka smiled warmly at her. Let's both keep training hard, okay? Serena stared at Uraraka with utter shock, almost unable to comprehend how selfless Uraraka looked. It's almost like I'm talking to Izu, Serena noticed as she smiled. Izuku really has been a good influence on Uraraka, just as he was to her. But more than that, she felt inspired by Uraraka just now. The weight of her guilt was freed from her shoulders and replaced with a warm fire of inspiration. Serena raised herself and took Uraraka's hand, chuckling a bit as the latter lifted a pinky so that she didn't use her quirk. Okay, Serena nodded, blinking away a few tears. Maybe next time we can have a real match. It's a promise. Uraraka grinned back. Izuku meanwhile looked at the two with pride and happiness. Seeing Serena blame herself like that felt painful for him, like he was staring at himself doing the exact same thing in the past. It was something he never wanted to see be repeated by his friends. But he was thankful that Uraraka eased her out of it, not blaming her at all, and instead looking on the bright side while promising to grow stronger together. He never felt prouder as a class rep and as a friend to both. Noticing that Uraraka's phone began vibrating, Izuku spoke up. Well, if you're sure you're fine, then we'll get out of your hair then, Izuku said. Thanks, you too, still, for looking out for me. Uraraka nodded, her pink cheeks growing brighter as she looked at Izuku. The two nodded and made their way toward the door. But not before Uraraka stood up swiftly from her seat. Deka. Izuku turned back to see her giving him a thumbs up and a confident smile. Beat him. For all of us. Izuku's mouth was kept in a thin line, but he nodded, that determination of ours fueling his own. And with that, the two students left the room, leaving Uraraka and her Pokemon. Now alone, relatively, Uraraka looked at her phone, once more ringing with a call. Breathing in deep, Uraraka answered. Hey, sorry for not picking up earlier, Daddy, Uraraka said. Some of my friends came to check in on me. Oh no, it's fine, really, the voice of Uraraka's father replied. Sorry to call you when you were busy. Tell me, was one of those friends that Deka fellow you always talk about? Uraraka's blush grew bright red. And maybe, she muttered. Ah, I see. Is he still there? Mr. Uraraka's calm, kind voice switched to a tight, protective tone. I would have words with the boy trying to take my little girl away from me. Daddy. Ochako gasped aghast. Her blush worsened till she looked like a strawberry. It didn't help when she looked to the side to see Erlin and Chu snickering teasingly at her. Ah! Ochako heard her father exclaim at the other end, and the muffled words of her mother before he continued. Sorry, that was your mother telling me to ease off with the whole protective dad bit. Yeah, a bit, Erlin overheard, sarcastically deadpanning. But, anyway, your mom and I saw your match on TV. You were amazing, Mr. Uraraka exclaimed, amazed. You almost reached that Todoroki guy. You were so fast and close. You should have seen Conkeldurr. He was cheering you on so much I thought the neighbors were going to complain. Ochako frowned, whatever cheery air she had put up for her friends dropping rapidly. It wasn't that close. I didn't do that good. Ochako denied, her voice leaking bitterness. I didn't have a plan for when that attack came. I knew it was coming and I couldn't do anything. I lost in one move. I failed. Uraraka's hand on the table clawed and clenched into a trembling fist. Her father was silent, listening intently to her daughter's self-criticism. You lost, yes, but that doesn't mean you still can't be a pro-hero, her father replied softly and lovingly. I know I'm not the best when it comes to understanding this kind of stuff, but there's always next year, right? And you made it so far already. I know I did, but I wish I could have done more. Uraraka began to whimper slightly. All my matches were over so fast, and I barely got to do anything in both. The scouts barely saw anything from me. What are you in such a hurry for? Mr. Uraraka chuckled in that amused fatherly tone. I **sniff**. I just want to help you guys out. Ochako sniffled, her shoulders shaking. As soon as I can. Ochako. There's no need for you to rush, her father said, soft pride brimming in his voice. The fact that you care so much means that you're going to be an amazing, kind, and caring hero. There are no words I can say to express just how proud of you we are. Uraraka's tears fell down her cheeks, landing on the table as she broke down. Her Pokemon came up the table and beside her, joining her father in their comfort for her. Outside, Izuku and Serena walked away, their eyes downcast and sad for their friend. The two didn't mean to spy on her phone call, they really didn't, but they still felt concerned for her, and so stayed to see how she really felt. Their worries were right. Ochako is taking it pretty hard. I didn't get to do much to help her like before, Izuku thought, ashamed that he barely got to ask if she was actually okay, and then just failed. Now, she's the one cheering me on. Izuku felt a hand grab a hold of his. He perked up and looked to see Serena beside him, looking at him with a sad, comforting smile. She's all right, Serena said. Her parents got it handled. They don't need us to help cheer her up. Izuku wondered if what Serena said was more for his benefit or her own. Regardless, Izuku smiled softly back, clutching her hand with his, to which she in turn slid her fingers next to his. The two turned away, blushing madly, yet smiling. What is up with me lately? Izuku thought to himself. Serena, Momo, Ochako, Sue, Mina, even Hagakure. I always get like this with them. Holding hands, linking arms, feeling like this. Izuku could tell how his heart raced and beat like a drum. This couldn't be. No, it can't. They're close friends, the best female friends I have, but they wouldn't like me like that. See, could they? And even if they did, I would just screw it all up. Girls don't like the shy, nerdy, anxious types, much less a dash. Izuku fought the urge to smack himself in the face. There he went again. Despite his progress, despite finally earning friends, a quirk, and a shred of self-confidence, he always goes back to calling himself that. Deku. It's practically hardwired into his brain. Anytime he thinks a girl might like him, they won't because he is a Deku. Weak, plain, and useless. Any chance he might get praised for his good grades? Wrong, because he's a Deku who must have cheated off his classmates. Anytime something good might be coming up for him? No, because he's Deku, and nothing good should ever come to a worthless pile of trash like Deku. It was so infuriating, he realized, how hard it is to try and erase 11 years of bullying and self-deprecation with only the bare minimum of his mother and Pokemon as support. No friends, Bakuga made sure of that, no father. He just up and left. It made Izuku almost jealous of Todoroki, wishing he could have at least had an asshole dad in person to hate. Izuku blinked in surprise. Huh, that's new, Izuku realized. Hate. That wasn't a word he often used or felt. Sure, he was angry and bitter about his father for leaving him and his mother because he was quirkless. He disliked the bullying and favoritism of Aldra immensely. Bakugo even scratched the surface at times, but he never truly hated anyone. To him, to hate is to be like Bakugo and his cronies, and all those who hated him just because he was quirkless. It was to despise and look down on someone like he was looked down upon and despised for existing. It was to act irrationally against someone like Bakugo did countless times to him. He understood why his Pokemon, Serena, and now even Mina would feel like that towards Bakugo and Aldra, but Izuku never had it in him to hate before because he never wanted to follow that example from Bakugo. Until now, apparently. Nearly left alone in the second event, Shinse's actions against Serena, Ojiro, and Aoyama, Bakuga's actions against Mina, and Todoroki's actions against Momo, he never felt such bitterness and anger before. The only times that came close were when he told off Aizawa for signaling him out in the apprehension test or his fight against Bakugo in the training exercise, and that last one was mostly chalked up to the adrenaline of the fight. But lately, it feels like he has been an emotional mess, barely able to contain his anger in a way he never struggled before. Was this what Serena and Mina felt with Bakugo? What Todoroki felt toward Endeavor? What's going on with me? Izuku thought. Hey, Aizu, Serena spoke up, bringing him out of his thoughts. You want to head back to the stands? Or you want to head to the waiting room to prepare? I think Tokoimi's fight should be over by now. After taking a moment to ponder, Izuku replied, I think I might as well head to the waiting room. Prepare. Now, Uraraka's defeat left Izuku as the sole person left to win the tournament and free Momo from her engagement to Todoroki. Thinking about it more clearly, It was actually unclear whether Todoroki himself would even honor the agreement. When they talked, Todoroki had said that he took advantage of the agreement to make Yaoyorozu join his team and do what he said, but he didn't say he liked the agreement. In fact, he said the opposite. And even now, after all that's happened, he's still making the same mistakes. Todoroki scoffed. Todoroki meant endeavor, and that arranging this quirk marriage between him and Momo was a mistake he was repeating. He made it sound like it was dissatisfying to him to go through with this, too, Izuku thought. He almost scoffed, finding it ridiculous that Todoroki would claim that he was just as mad about this as Momo. But still, it meant Todoroki wasn't on board with actually marrying Momo, only using the benefits the agreement had to succeed in the tournament. To throw him off, specifically, would that mean that even if he lost, Todoroki would just break it off himself? It would fit in line with how he wants to spit in his father's face. But I made Yaoyorozu join my team to further shake your resolve and defeat you in the event, Todoroki had said, and prove to my old man I can win with my own power and cunning. No, even if Todoroki wins, it doesn't mean he would do Momo a favor and call off the agreement, Izuku decided. He didn't have any qualms using her to get to me. There's no guarantee he would do something for anyone other than himself. Besides he thought about how Momo clung to him, crying and the hope relit in her eyes when he promised to win for her, Bakuga's attacks on Mina, the pink girl's injuries, and his confrontation with Bakugo, or Todoroki's revelation that he was neglecting Vulpix out of spite to his father. Izuku's eyes hardened. No, I won't let them off for that, any of them. I don't intend to lose. Serena, if you don't mind, I would like to be alone when we get to the waiting room, Izuku said to his best friend. Not that I don't enjoy your company or support, but it's fine. Izu, I get it. Serena raised her other hand to stop Izuku. You need to focus your way. I understand. Just make sure that no matter what, you beat that bastard once and for all. Izuku nodded, smiling determined. And I will say that again when we get there. Serena turned her head away, sticking her chin up and smiling smugly. As if sensing his confusion, she continued. You said you wanted to be alone when you get to the waiting room. I'm a gal true to my word, but that doesn't mean I can't personally escort you there. Izuku's look of surprise broke when he chuckled. Escort? What are you, my bodyguard or something? Izuku raised an eyebrow at her, amused. That's exactly what I am. Serena gave him a side-eyed smirk. Knowing you, you'll probably start mumbling a word vomit stream, miss the waiting room, and head out to the field early. Wouldn't that be embarrassing? The two broke down in laughter, continuing their way to Izuku's waiting room. Finally, they reached the room and exchanged some final words of encouragement and advice against Todoroki. After a quick hug that had both of them blushing, Serena left to go back to the stands. Izuku smiled as she left, unaware that his eyes had drifted, and stared at her swaying, but until a few seconds. He blushed and shook his head, clearing his mind of the perverse image, even if he likely never will, and opened the door to enter the waiting room, only for a voice to call out to him. I see that you're finally here. Izuku froze, his heart stopping for a second. That voice. Izuku heard the voice before. Not in person, but it was to be expected of a hero fanboy like himself to know the voice that was the self-imposed rival of his idol. Izuku turned his wide-eyed stare to where the flame hero, Endeavor, stalked his way toward him from the other end of the hall. Endeavor, Izuku muttered, but his tone lost the awe and wonder he would have had for meeting the number 2 hero. As if all I heard of him would deserve that title. I've been looking for you, and was told this was your waiting room. Endeavor stopped a few feet before Midoriya, his cold gaze an oxymoron for the flames that served as his mask. Apologies if it comes off disturbing, but I had something to talk to you about. Okay. Izuku nodded, giving Endeavor the go-ahead. The 9th successor of One for All's face was as stoic as he could manage, but inside a fire burned in him far hotter than the flames on Endeavor's body. He arranged a quirk marriage with my mother's parents. He bought my mother like she was a prize for sale, all for her ice quirk. To make me, Izuku remembered the revelations Todoroki informed him. The only memories of my mother that I have left are of her crying. I remembered her calling my left side hideous and unbearable before pouring boiling water on my face. As much as Todoroki's actions and attitude were anything to be sympathetic about, his past was still horrible, something no child should ever have to go through. And all of it happened because of the greed and ambition of the man standing in front of him. Izuku did his best to keep the anger inside, his hand clenching till it was pale white. I watched your efforts in the second event. You are to be commended for your strategizing. Endeavor began with an admittingly honest appraisal of the boy's skills. It would do him better to butter the boy up before confronting him with his question and request, Endeavor figured. I did the best I could with what I had, Izuku replied, his voice even and restrained. I would not have gotten as far as I did without the cooperation and trust of my comrades. A slight narrowing of Endeavor's eyes made it seem he did not approve of Izuku's humbling, but it only lasted for a second before he expertly banished it. Humbleness is a virtue and an admirable trait. However, do not let it extinguish your self-worth, nor downplay your strengths, Endeavor replied, trying to off as sage in his words. I watched that strength further in your matches with the brainwashing boy and Ingenium's younger brother. The flames and light you created. I would almost believe that you had a fire quirk as well. Izuku recalled his feat in his match against Shinso. At the time, he did find it odd that those blue, ghost-like flames had appeared and did no damage to himself or Shinso, but he was more focused on his fight against the brainwashing student as well as their clash of ideals and beliefs. From an outsider's perspective, it would look like I had manifested a fire quirk, Izuku pondered. But then your fight with the Ida boy, you showed a power I found more familiar, Endeavor mentioned. You created such wind pressure with just a flick of your fingers. It reminds of me another's power. You seem to have much in common with All Might. Fear gripped Izuku's heart. Does he know? Does he know about One for All? Izuku thought with panic. After observing Endeavor and analyzing his words, Izuku didn't believe so. No, I don't think that's it. With what Todoroki said, he would have been far more aggressive and confrontational if he knew the truth. Either way, he's one person I can't let know about All Might's secret. Tell me, boy. Endeavor walked closer, leaning in while Izuku took a step back. Are you All Might's secret child? Deja vu. Izuku deadpanned internally, recalling how this man's son asked much the same in their own private talk. If you mean I'm related to All Might, no, sorry. Izuku shook his head. My biological father is in the US on a business trip. A business trip that has lasted over 11 years. Izuku kept his bitter thoughts to himself. To be honest, he could see more how Eevee thought he would be just like Todoroki. Bakugo, Todoroki, Endeavor, and Hisashi, if he were actually vindictive and let the bitterness get to him, he might have had hatred for anything related to fire, too. Izuku thanked Arceus he didn't otherwise. He would have had a loyal and loving fire type like Combustion. Endeavor's eyes narrowed again, but backed away. I see. Apologies for the assumptions. Endeavor apologized, but the two both knew that he was far from convinced. I asked because of how fortuitous this all would be. It's my Shoto's duty to surpass All Might, yet he keeps himself from fulfilling his full potential. Fighting All Might's own progeny would be the wake-up call needed to make him Sirizen. Izuku's fists clenched harder, but held himself back. It would do anyone no good, especially himself, if he were to attack the number 2 hero unprompted. So, I have a request for your match against my son. Endeavor pointed at Izuku. Hit him hard, don't hold anything back, defeat him if you must. Make him show his true potential before he ruins himself. Endeavor lowered his hand and stepped back. That is all. Excuse me. Endeavor continued on his way, passing Izuku as he stared at the ground, his eyes unseen. Just before Endeavor could leave, Izuku's voice stopped him. Endeavor, I'm not All Might. Huh. Endeavor turned his head. And Todoroki's the same. Izuku turned his head, his determined eyes glaring back at Endeavor's. He's your son, but he isn't you. I'll make him see that and save both Momo and his Vulpix you tossed onto him. Izuku glared at his still form before turning back to his waiting room. Accept it or not, I won't let others suffer because of your family issues. Izuku turned the knob of his door, opening it to enter. Endeavor's voice stopped him again. He told you everything, didn't he? Izuku froze once more in his stride, pondering if perhaps Endeavor had an ice quirk of his own, and didn't even need to curse his wife with their marriage. Izuku turned his gaze back to Endeavor, but the number 2 hero still saw ahead of him. That anger, the way you hold yourself back, you look at me like Shoto does. You know of what I've done, and only Shoto could have told you. Izuku didn't bother to reply verbally or physically. They both knew it was, I do care for them, all of them. Endeavor's head seemed to tilt down, Izuku realizing that he was looking down at his left hand. Izuku looked down at it, and what he saw made his eyes widen. A ring. Circling his ring finger, the golden band was not something he normally saw on Endeavor in all the interviews or post-villain fights, but there it was, a golden ring with a blue sapphire in the shape of a flower. Upon closer inspection, it was the Rindu, or autumn bell, flower. It looked almost spotless. Endeavor's thumb brushed over it like, so tenderly, it looked an alien expression on the man before him. I have made mistakes, many of them, and grievous. Endeavor continued. I care not whether I change your opinion of me, but know that in all I have done, whether blinded or clear, has been for their good. Do what you will, all I care about is my son's future. Believe me or not, it makes no difference. Endeavor raised his head and continued on his way. One last sentence uttered. I did not gift him his Vulpix. Soon, the flame hero was gone, and Izuku was ever more confused. Afterward, Izuku sat in a chair by a table in his waiting room, pondering all he had heard and all it entailed. He didn't want to believe him, not after what he had done, but Izuku could tell true sincerity, despite what his negative assumptions would say otherwise. Endeavor was sincere in everything he said, but it only made things all the more complicated. A knock on the door interrupted him from his thoughts. It's open, Izuku called out. The man who opened the door, he didn't expect. Mr. Taisher? Izuku questioned. Mr. Midoriya, so glad you came. Taisher greeted the verdant-haired teen with a smile. I have been meaning to talk with you about something if you don't mind. It will only take a minute. Izuku had to keep himself from chuckling. Still, everybody's keen on talking with me. Ibra yelped as she flew, her butt landing on the green ruff rather softly. Shiozaki is out of bounds. Tokoyami advances. Midnight declared. And that's that, ladies and germs. 1. A's Dark Knight has vanquished 1. B's Holy Maiden. Present Mike announced as Tokoyami steadied himself back to his feet, a few scratches on his body after the hard-fought match against Shiozaki. Gah, damn it. Tetsu cursed, hand messing with his hair. There goes our last member. Man, this whole last round has been a giant show-off for Class A. Careful, Tetsu. You're starting to sound too much like Monoma. Itsuka warned. And how, pray tell, is that a bad thing? Monoma questioned, aghast. Itsuka merely raised an eyebrow at him, as if saying, really? He does remember that he ended up in a tiebreaker with Kirishima and Shiozaki won against that Kaminari guy, right? Hananuki whispered to Tokage. Let him be. Setsuna shrugged, looking at the field to see Tokoyami help up Shiozaki, the two bowing in respect to each other. Doesn't look like there's any hard feelings down there, so no biggie. And while Setsuna gave off an uninterested facade, she was glad to see that despite how fierce the fight got, Shiozaki was alright, and that Tokoyami guy was respectful enough to show her praise and some chivalry helping her up. However, what drew her attention was the fight coming next, or rather one of the fighters specifically. Setsuna frowned as she recalled how particularly vicious Katsuki Bakugo was in his first match against the Ishido girl. The latter looked pretty cool with that pink skin and hair, yellow horns, and those cool eyes. It gave her an almost alien-like appeal to her that Setsuna fought freaky in a cool way. When she saw her fight, Setsuna grew more interested in Ishido, like she would be a pretty cool chick to get to know and hang out with. She liked her style and everything. But then there was Bakugo. While Tokage admitted that the guy was pretty strong, how the match ultimately devolved into a near bloodbath at the end was definitely not cool. She was almost jeering along with the crowd for the fight to stop, worried that Bakugo was going to hurt Ishido, maybe even kill. But then her curious nature came out. She was always quite the curious girl growing up, always observant, always asking and wondering what was going on around her. It was how she became quite the gossip girl in middle school, and very little has changed since then. Except, she was more respectful and shit. Hell, she had to fight against instinct to separate one of her ears and float it down to the field to hear clearer. But she was still curious and quite good at picking up subtle things, even from afar and without her quirk. So, it was little wonder how Setsuna was able to notice a change of mood between the two fighters sometime by the end. How Mina became more aggressive toward Bakugo, like she was digging into him with something, and then after that Bakugo's anger and fury shot up and the fight escalated from there. It was that acid slap to Bakugo's face that set off the monster inside Bakugo to surface. But what got the gears in Setsuna's mind cranking was why? What happened down there? What did both Mina and Bakugo say that caused all that to happen? What set Mina off enough to slap that acid onto his face? These were the various questions that Setsuna thought. Aw man, Shia lost. Pony whined sadly, comically slumping forwards. But at least she was awesome. Pony immediately perked up so fast that some of her classmates worried that she may have given herself whiplash or smacked herself in the face with her own assets. Even San behind her had to duck lest he was at risk of getting impaled by her horns. What do you think, Reiko? Don't you think they did well? Pony directed her question to the chin-length, pale gray-haired girl beside her, her parted hair covering the left side of her face, while the right showed her dreary pale blue eye, with dark bags under her eye. Her half-slumped posture, her raised arms, and her slack hands almost mirrored Azui, but in a spookier flare. The girl nodded. Indeed. The clash of holiness and darkness, between sanctity and tenebrosity, was as creditable as it was magnanimous, Reiko said, her tone oozing mystery and eeriness. Pony said nothing, her eyes blinking repeatedly, while comical question marks danced over her still head. Spooky, Reiko simplified. Oh, I guess so, Pony hummed, nodding and smiling as if nothing happened. If Reiko had anything to say or express about her classmates' naivety, she didn't show or say it, instead choosing to focus her attention on the retreating figures on the field, specifically on the avian-headed student from Class 1A and his stoic eyes. Revelry in the dark, Reiko muttered, the light blush that came out all the more obvious on her pale skin. Off the side, another of her classmates, Shirhai Korwaro, perked up and likewise muttered, revelry in the dark. Down at the field, Tokoyami paused in his stride toward the exit, directing his gaze to the stands. The bird-headed boy looked around for the cause of this rising feeling, but he could not spot his target. Realizing that he had frozen on his way out of the field, Tokoyami shook his head and continued, trying to ignore the sensation of camaraderie that compelled him just now. Revelry in the dark. Tokoyami left the field muttering, slinking into the darkness of the exit. Tokoyami found a figure walking down the opposite end of his path, gazing at the striding ash-blonde teen making his way toward him. The boy wore a new version of the UA gym uniform. The prior one he possessed was full of burn marks that required the replacement. And yet, despite the wardrobe change, Tokoyami could spot the one mark that the boy could never remove on his left cheek. The claw-like mark now faded to a pink shade that nearly blended with his natural skin tone. Out of the way, bird brain. Bakugo growled, glaring at him. You're in my way to my match. Tokoyami narrowed his eyes, quenching down the annoyance and rage that such a comment would elicit from a less mature and composed individual. The metamorphic teen pondered briefly if the demeaning nickname was simply a half-hearted simplification for Bakugo to remember him by, or something more personal and discriminatory. Apologies. Tokoyami passively conceded and stepped aside, allowing a clearer path for Bakugo. I was unaware of your need to occupy twice the space of your shoulders to feel comfortable for my appearance. An angry tick mark comically appeared over the blonde's head. Buzz off with that shit. Bakugo barked in response at the dig at him. What do you take me for? Some CRC? Pansy idiot. Fuck off. I see. Despite his less than agreeable personality, he isn't completely detestable, Tokoyami surmised, fully at ease knowing that not a single one of his classmates appears to hold negative outlooks of metamorphic individuals, like the creature rejection plan. I see. Apologies for the assumption. May the darkness give you fortune. Tokoyami apologized and continued his way as they passed each other. Hey. Bakugo paused and spoke up, likewise stopping Tokoyami in his tracks. You also teamed up with Deka during the second event, so you see him as a friend, right? Did that bastard think he gained your brownie points by talking shit about me? Tokoyami turned his gaze back at Bakugo, raising an eyebrow at the peculiarity of the questioning. My initial ascertain of you was originally predicated on your viciousness during Ishido's fight. Midoriya gave me no input of you other than your battle prowess and threat level to our cause. Tokoyami replied, narrowing his eyes at him as he remembered that distasteful ending to that fight. But yes, I see Midoriya as a trustworthy comrade. Bakugo narrowed his eyes back before scoffing. Whatever. Just know that I'm coming for you in the semi-finals and blasting your ass out of the ring. Bakugo confidently barked. You won't get in my way of winning this tournament and beating Deku. Just before Bakugo marched on forward out to the field, this time, Tokoyami's voice halted Bakugo in his tracks. I sense you carry great darkness in your heart, with much of its malicious intent towards Midoriya, Tokoyami said, narrowing his eyes in suspicion. I know not the cause nor reason for your mutual animosity toward each other, yet the shadow over you appears marred in insecurity and pride. Bakugo returned his gaze at Tokoyami, now fully angry if the bulging veins on the sides of his head were of any indication. I mean no offense, I merely state my observations, Tokoyami clarified. And whatever darkness I sense in Midoriya, no matter how terrifying, is fueled by the fire of righteous protection of his loved ones. A fire you stoked with your machinations in your last match. And yet you let his very presence cloud your vision. My only advice I can give to you, from one who knows the perils, is to let go of the fury before it consumes you, and all you hold dear. Tokoyami politely bowed and turned around, walking away without another word. Bakugo watched him leave, his eyes clouded by shadows. Soon, however, his growl returned, flashing his gnarling teeth. What the hell does that feather-faced extra know about me? Bakugo thought, the jabs at his insecurity and pride only adding fuel to the flame of his anger, oblivious to how accurate they were right now. Bakugo harshly turned around and marched faster out into the field, the light of the outside showing the blazing fury in his eyes. I'll show that extra not to look down on me by beating him in our match. Then, shitty Deka, you're next. Kirishima walked down the dark pathway toward the field sluggishly, as if he were walking while chained down by invisible weights. However, the weights themselves were not a fear of facing his opponent, or the fear of losing or getting hurt, but rather a different kind of fear. Throughout the festival, Kirishima had question after question pile up in his mind, and with every single one, he felt he knew the answer, but something just wouldn't let him have it from the inner subconscious it was stored in. Was it some quirk that was dulling his senses? Or was he just too naive and gullible to see the truth? Manliness. It was the term that Kirishima strove to live by, a term he picked up from his idol, the hero known as Crimson Riot, who had a similar, hardening quirk to himself, where everyone idolized All Might as their #1 hero, and he was a close second in Kirishima's mind. Crimson Riot was his favorite, and Kirishima always strived to live up to the ideals he espoused, including manliness. How it can be something to describe both men and women, how it meant being brave, fearless in the face of danger, strong against the overwhelming odds, and honorable to the code and ethics of a hero. Kirishima thought he knew what it meant to be manly, knew what manly was, and what wasn't. Now, he knew he didn't know a goddamn thing. First, there was Midoriya, and for the most part, his green-haired class rep still seemed very manly in Kirishima's opinion. Yeah, sometimes the guy can be a bit skittish and nervous around people, but when the going got tough, he leaped into the jaws of danger faster than anyone, like when he jumped in to try and save All Might from that Shigaraki guy in the USJ. Or how he always found a way to come out on top even if it meant sacrificing himself and his limbs to obtain victory or save somebody. And, above all, how he seemed to really get what it meant to be a hero better any of them, saving people, inspiring them, and to not let anyone or anything say otherwise. But then there was Bakugo, and everything started to flip on his head. At first, he thought the guy was manly too. Yeah, He could be a bit ruthless and harsh, but he was so strong, fearless, and assured of himself that Kirishima couldn't help but admire it. He saw it when they fought through thick and thin in the USJ, where he was worrying and questioning what to do, thinking to find and help his classmates, especially the ones who weren't as physically powerful as he or Bakugo. Bakugo was clear and concise with his goals. Stop the villains, cut off their means of escape, and win the day. At the time, Kirishima thought that Bakugo believed in their classmates, believed that they could handle themselves, and was looking out for them in his own way. Now, he wasn't so sure if they even were a blip on his radar. If Bakugo was anything, he was a fighter. Kirishima could at least see that. His battle prowess, ingenuity, and adaptiveness were all so good. He was a prodigy in the making. He wouldn't give his opponents an inch, and when they did, he would fight twice as hard, 10 times as hard to make up for his mistakes to ensure an overwhelming victory. He saw that in the second event as well as the USJ, figuring out how to take down the warp villain after they screwed up the first time, pressing on and taking back their flags and more from Monoma's team to secure their place, and still going on to ensure victory by trying to defeat Midoriya's team. Kirishima thought he was determined, but now he was questioning how much of it was determination or obsession. In the weeks leading up to the sports festival, Kirishima made an effort to get to know Bakugo more and, selfishly, he thought if he got to know Bakugo more, maybe then he would be just as confident, determined, and strong as he was. Kirishima had asked why Bakugo had wanted to be a hero, but Bakugo would always look and shout at him like the answer was obvious. Kirishima thought it was something noble like following in his idol's footsteps, All Might, as Kirishima tried to do with Crimson Riot. But when he asked that, Bakugo didn't say he wanted to be just like All Might. He said he wanted to be better. He wanted to surpass and beat All Might and be a greater hero than even he. It was almost ludicrous for Kirishima to think about. All Might was like a god. The idea of surpassing him felt impossible. But then Kirishima thought the same about living up to Crimson Riot, too. Afterward, Kirishima saw Bakugo in a more awe-inspiring light, finding inspiration in him for having the strength and the will to attempt to achieve his goal, no matter how insurmountable, and Kirishima wanted to be as strong as him, just as manly as him. Now, he didn't know if manly was the right word to describe Bakugo anymore. I don't even know what to believe anymore, Kirishima thought miserably, almost all his assumptions and views of things turning on their heads or straight up crumbling before his eyes. He thought Mina could see what he saw in Bakugo, but the two didn't work on a fundamental limit, always at odds, and not even in the good, rivalry sort of way. Then came their matchup, and the idea of a friend group of their own went up in flames. The state that Bakugo had left Mina, the way he did it, didn't look honorable or heroic at all. It looked like a wild, rabid animal lashing out. There was no honor or respect for his opponent, just angry, vindictive retaliation. Not at all manly. And worst of all was that Bakugo knew what Mina was to him. She was his best and oldest friend, someone who was always supportive and kind to everyone, the one who helped inspire him when he gave up on himself. Kirishima knew that despite his retorts and "I don't cares," Bakugo took the information in and knew what Mina was to him. And he had no qualms about still beating her to that state. Not manly at all. But then, there was the one thing that it all tied down to, the one thread that tied everything together on what was going on. Izuku Midoriya. Kirishima didn't blame Midoriya for what Bakugo did to Mina, far from it. But Kirishima knew that Midoriya had something to do with all this. Why Mina disliked Bakugo so much, why the two fought so viciously against each other, what led to that beat up at the end, it all had to do with Midoriya. Jiro made it clear that she knew too when she asked him if Bakugo said anything about Midoriya. Kirishima wasn't too naive not to see the tension between Bakugo and Midoriya. It was plain and clear to see since orientation when Bakugo first tried attacking Midoriya during Mr. Aizawa's quirk apprehension test, and only magnified after their first battle training exercise. The two knew each other from before UA, and whatever happened between the two, it was bad, like really bad. So bad that the animosity seemed to extend beyond the two to where Midoriya's friends, especially Serena, despised the explosive blonde. Were the two friends that split apart after a disagreement? Did their families get into a fight that filtered down to them? Or did one of them wrong the other one? The last one was the most likely scenario. But then, who was the one that was wronged? And who was the one that did the wronging? Again, the answer seems obvious, but Kirishima's fists clenched. But then that doesn't explain why Bakugo hates Midoriya so much. It looks like Midoriya may have done something to make Bakugo so resentful of him, but Midoriya doesn't seem like the type of guy to do that either. Was I wrong about him? Or was I wrong about Bakugo? Who was at fault? And he remembered Midoriya's inspiring speech and Bakugo's burning, hating eyes for Midoriya. And was I just wrong? Memories of gazing at Bakugo like a drooling fanboy were mockingly tossed at him. Am I really that desperate and insecure? He recalled seeing Mina being brought into Recovery Girl's room, Izuku and his friends worried for her, and Serena's look at him, before remembering his past. Can I do anything right? Unable to take it, Kirishima's fist hardened and smashed the wall to his side, a mini crater forming. Kirishima panted, the adrenaline of anger burning out rather quickly, and was left with indecision and confusion once more. Ahem. Are you alright, Kirishima-sama? A voice spoke up. Kirishima looked up to see that it was Ibra Shiozaki, the girl from Class 1B, coming down the exit from the field. The vine-haired girl stared at him and the results of his internal conflict with obvious concern. Why, yeah, I am fine, Kirishima lied, taking his hand out of the mini crater he formed, showing the fist-shaped indentation he left behind. Jay just nervous is all for my fight. Ah, I see. Shiozaki nodded, understanding. Understandable given your opponent. How deplorable and violent he was last match. Blessings onto that poor girl he's so ruthlessly named. Why, yeah, alright. Kirishima just nodded, not feeling the desire or willingness to defend his friend. Oh, my apologies. I'm aware that he is of your class. Ibra bowed in apology. It is disgraceful of me to speak ill of one of your classmates as Monoma has been doing. It's alright, I get it. No hard feelings or anything. The girl he beat up is of our class as well. Kirishima waved away her apology. And yet, you seem hesitant, unsure. Ibra suddenly replied, a look of curiousness on her brow. You appear to carry both a torch of righteous retribution and yet carry the weight of fear and apprehension. Why? Kirishima blinked in surprise, surprised by how intuitive the girl was. Kirishima's shoulders slackened and decided he needed to spill. But Bakugo, I don't know anymore. I thought he used to be this cool, strong, and manly guy. I wanted to be friends with him, wanted for Mina, and the others to be friends with him too because I thought that I could be like him.
Cool, strong, manly.
And yet everything in me says that something is not right with him. But if that's true, then what does that say about me that I misjudge a guy like that? How can I face my friends when I'm the one who stuck with that guy the most? Kirishima felt a pair of hands on his shoulders, looking up to see Ibra's kind and understanding smile. It means that you are as human and flawed as everyone else. Ibra answered. All of us can be lost and lose our way, make mistakes, believe and trust in those who shouldn't. But not all are as humble nor willing to accept when one has failed, even less to ask for forgiveness. Like the prodigal son who knelt before his father. After wasting his inheritance, he begged for forgiveness and attempted to make amends, and his father welcomed him back with open arms, celebrated his return, and said he was lost and is found. Ibra raised a hand and patted Kirishima's cheek, wiping away the tear that rolled down his cheek, even using that tear-stained thumb to make the sign of the cross on his forehead in a blessing. If your heart is true with regret, even if it is scary, go to them and say your regrets, and I'm sure that they will welcome you back in time. Ibra smiled at him. It would be very strong and manly, would it not? A sad chuckle broke out of his mouth, grinning at Shiozaki. Why, yeah, it would be. Kirishima nodded. Thanks, Shiozaki. My pleasure. It is my duty to my faith and as a future hero to lend my aid to those who require it, Shiozaki replied. And please, just call me Ibra. Alright, Shio I mean Ibra-sen. Kirishima corrected himself. Good. Ibra nodded before Mick's voice projected from the PA and outside. I believe you have a match to head to. Nervous still? And no, I'm not. Kirishima clenched his fists, slamming his knuckles together. I know what I got to do now. Then don't let me hold you any longer. May the Lord watch over you and your endeavors. Shiozaki stepped aside and bowed. What? Thanks, you too. Kirishima stuttered, scratching his head as he gave Shiozaki the courtesy and respected her faith. Before she left, though, Ibra paused and said, "Oh, and your other classmate, Kaminari-san, right? If you happen to see him again, tell him I would be open to discuss that date he proposed, if he would be willing to overlook my victory against him." Kirishima blinked, surprised at the request and information he learned, but nodded, grinning. "Sure thing." Kirishima gave her fist pump. "If you want, I can help give him a shove in the right direction. Help make sure he's not lost and all. I like the guy, but he's not really the brightest tool in the shed." Ibra giggled. "I would appreciate it, and I don't mind." Shiozaki's smile turned almost predatorial in its shift. "I happen to like boys that need some guidance." As she walked away, Kirishima deadpanned and stared at the holy girl, who might not be as holy as Kirishima first thought as she left. "I don't know whether I should be jealous of Kaminari or sorry for him," Kirishima thought. Shaking his head, Kirishima hardened past his nerves and turned around toward the shining light that was the end of the tunnel. "I know what I got to do now. I won't be lost anymore," Kirishima thought. "I'm going to get my answers. You'll tell me the truth of what's going on, Bakugo, even if I have to beat you to do it." Kyokujiro stared at the field as the new fighters came out from their tunnels to the roar of the crowd, some cheering and others, not so much. "And now, we move on to the last match of the second round," Mike said. "And I gotta say this matchup is sure to get our blood pumping and booming." Jiro cringed, plugging her fingers into her ears to tune out some of Present Mick's loud voice. A downside to her quirk was that it made listening to loud-ass voices like the voice heroes over the intercoms a nightmare for her. "Here," Jiro heard as she unplugged her ears and felt a hand tap her shoulder. The purple-haired girl turned to see Momo had her other hand outstretched to her, a pair of earbuds on her. "Earbuds?" Jiro questioned. "They're Hatsums, the pink-haired support course girl that helped Midoriya in the second event. Her all-purpose earbuds," Momo clarified. "Midoriya still had his, and I asked if he could lend me his for you. They can help filter out Present Mick's loud volume." "Oh shit. Thanks, Yamamoto." Jiro thanked and took the earbuds. "You're welcome, and thank Midoriya, too," Momo replied. "When he heard about your dilemma, I barely finished talking before he offered them himself. He would also like to extend his apologies for not noticing before." Jiro's cheeks burned a bright red as she looked away, embarrassed. "Oh, well, tell him it's no big deal, but thanks anyway," Jiro stuttered. "That is what I figured you would say, Kyoka-san." Momo smiled gracefully. Jiro's blush only worsened by still put on the earbuds, adjusting them just as Mick's voice began to air again. She barely had to fiddle with the buds before it did what she wanted, and had toned down Mick's volume to where it was manageable for her without issue. Maybe I should ask Midoriya to introduce me to Hatsum after this? Jiro thought to herself. Wouldn't mind getting some support course tech like this for my hero suit. At the mention of Midoriya in her thoughts, Jiro frowned, her mood dropping, not because of the verdant-haired teen himself, but rather all that she now knew of him and his tormentor. In one corner, he's ferocious, he's explosive, and he sure made that obvious last round. From the 1A hero course, it's Katsuki Baku. Mike announced the snarling blonde, who only snarled further at the reaction from the crowd. While some still cheered for the blonde, it was mixed with a chorus of boos and negative cheering, Mike helpfully reminding people of just how his last match went and how his opponent ended up. Jiro glared venomously at Katsuki Bakugo, distaste and fury burning in her as she looked at the boy again. Despite the cons of her hearing, it came with a lot of pros too, like being able to hear the fighters down on the field. Every match, if she focused, she was able to listen in on what the fighters were saying to each other, though in some cases she didn't need to. Midoriya's first matchup against that Shinso guy came to mind. She overheard what Shinso did to Aoyama, Serena, and Ojiro, which made it harder for her to sympathize with him when he spilled his life story about getting bullied for his villainous quirk, but she could still understand what led him to this point. She didn't need her quirk though to listen in on Midoriya's loud-ass voice when it was enhanced and loud enough for the whole stadium to hear. It was quite hard on her hearing if anything, but she couldn't blame the green bean. not like he knew what he was doing or anything. Then there was Todoroki and Serena's fight. It was harder trying to hear what the two were saying past the sounds of forming glaciers and rushing water, but Jiro was able to pick up most of it, the bulletin points being that something was off with Todoroki. He wasn't using his full power. He and Izuku talked, and Todoroki's quirk marriage engagement to Yaoyorozu. When she heard it all, she was right with Serena with her disgust and anger at Todoroki, especially concerning the last part, something she noted to talk with Momo about later. The Regal girl was by far her closest friend in UA, and to hear what she was going through made her feel like quite the lousy friend for not being around to help. Still, she heard the reasons why Serena quit, and she instantly knew she was talking about Midoriya, only greatening her already greatening desire to find out more about her class rep. And that's when she overheard everything during Mina's fight with Bakugo. Well, at least all she could hear past the annoyingly loud-ass explosions from Bakugo, but it was still enough. Bakugo was a bully and, from the looks of things, a very nasty one at that. The way he acted around Midoriya before was already suspicious, but Jiro figured it was just a pair of friends turned rivals. Now, with the context of what it actually was, it made everything Bakugo did come to a whole new light. Bakugo bullied Midoriya because everyone thought he was quirkless because his quirk hadn't come in yet, which was horrible enough. But then it made that scene where he attacked him during the quirk apprehension test something more disturbing in her mind, as if such an action was just one of many that didn't go unimpeded until now. Then there was the battle training exercise, and when Bakugo had used his gauntlets, she and the class already thought it was excessive, but ultimately Jiro and the others reasoned that Bakugo was just going overboard from some place of rivalry or some quirk of his that needed working out. But now she realized it was not the case of a student letting loose and running wild without knowing his limits. Bakugo knew his limits, knew fully what he was doing, and that was trying to use an explosion that could have killed someone on his victim, who was fighting back. The thought almost made her want to spill her guts out. And now, she knew the truth, or at least partially. There were still some things that she needed to make clear, like just how badly Bakugo bullied Midoriya, why he hated Midoriya so much for being quirkless, how and why did Yui admitted him into the school, and what did the name Deka truly meant. She tried asking Kirishima if he knew anything. It was clear the redhead knew nothing of how vicious Bakugo could truly be if he was so devastated at how badly injured Mino was, but she wondered if Bakugo may have spilled some things to the guy who was the closest approximation of a friend to him. Unfortunately, it seemed Bakugo was pretty tight-lipped about his past, and now she knew the reason why. And she would likely know even more once she overheard the fight happening right now. And in the other corner, we got the red-headed winner of our tiebreaker round, and just look at that determined look he's got. From the 1A hero course, it's Ejiro Kirishima. Mike introduced the redhead whose sturdy glare was accurate to Mick's introduction. It was very clear which among their two classmates Class 1A were rooting for. Midoriya's friend group had nothing but disdainful eyes toward Bakugo, especially Serena. Jiro joined in their disdain with all she recently picked up, and even Siro cheered rather enthusiastically for Kirishima, and the purple-haired girl picked up how his eyes flinched when their gaze wandered over to Bakugo. Clearly, Kirishima isn't the only one of their former team feeling guilty for helping that bastard, Jiro deduced, wondering if she should ask Siro if Bakugo told him anything too. Siro did seem to be a part of whatever friend group Kirishima was trying to form with Bakugo, but if Bakugo wouldn't tell anything to the closest approximation of a friend, then it was unlikely he would say anything to Siro. Over with Inko and the Bakugos. The two parents flinched as they picked up the boos coming from the crowd that were directed toward their son. They couldn't blame such a reaction from these people after what they all witnessed plain as day. But the boy was still their son, and to see his name already getting dragged through the mud, even if it was deserved, didn't mean their protective instincts as parents didn't flare up to stand up for their son. Inko was only as sympathetic toward the Bakugos rather than the boy himself. In a way, Inko felt it was karma that Bakugo was being looked down on by so many just as her son suffered the same in the past. His true nature was being displayed and scorned for how it should have been. However, what drew out a bitter pill to what would normally feel like divine justice was that her best friend was the mother of that boy, and she knew fully well how it must feel to have their child outcast by society. Unbeknownst to her, this similar dilemma was running through Tashinori's mind as well. The symbol of peace knew just what kind of person Bakugo was, or at least had an idea of it. Granted, a very surefire idea, and seeing the boy already get some comeuppance for his poor behavior did feel deserved. But his instincts as a hero, an idol, and teacher began to surface. For all his faults, the boy was still a student, and he now had a moral obligation to guide the boy toward a better path. And yet a part of him knew the boy shouldn't have even been a student here, to begin with. He could feel the moral struggle between his protectiveness and care for his prodigy clashing against his heroic instinct to find a way to redeem the astray youth. What kind of hero would I be to not lend a helping hand to someone in need? All Might thought, and from a certain angle, Bakugo looked like someone in clear need of help, even if it was from himself, and he didn't want it. Toshinori decided that he couldn't do much of anything right now except let the matches take their course. He was sure Nizu had a plan already forming in his intelligent brain for how to deal with Bakugo properly, and hoped that he could be a part of that plan. The number one hero decided that the best course of action for the moment was to let this situation proceed and deal with the aftermath and its full factors and results before acting on a knee-jerk course of action. Get ready, folks. It's another age-old clash between an unstoppable force versus an immovable object. Present Mike hyped up the fight, but which one will go down first? When did you decide to get all philosophical all of a sudden? Aizawa dryly questioned. Hey, I can be deep and thoughtful.
Mike whined.
I'm only going to say this once, shitty hair. Turn around and walk out the stage and you won't get hurt. Bakugo warned, lifting his palms where the crackles of mini explosions lit up, a challenging grin rising on his lips. Unless you think that shitty hardening of yours can stand up against me? Bakugo didn't know truly what to expect. Maybe he figured Kirishima would make some stupid joke or quip back with that dumb grin on his face. Probably something along the lines of manly or something. That wasn't what he got. To his surprise, Kirishima didn't say anything, simply bringing his forearms up in front of him, ready to activate his quirk at a moment's notice. The only expression Bakugo could see that was a response from Kirishima was the serious glare aimed right at him. Bakugo was at a loss. For all he knew about shitty hair for about a month or so, the red-headed lackey at least shared his desire for a fight and to learn how to improve. It was that drive that Bakugo saw something respectable about the clingy redhead that led him to let the guy hang around him for so long. Well, that and the fact he at least had the brains to recognize greatness and wish to learn from him, and he was far more competent than those lackeys from Aldra, whatever their names were. For all Bakugo didn't need or even want, Kirishima wanted to be his friend, and was the most open to him out of all his loser extra classmates. Here though, Kirishima didn't look friendly or open at all. He looked serious, determined, angry, and it was all directed toward him, like he did something wrong toward him. Bakugo scoffed at the audacity, finding the lack of verbal answering he expected to be even more insulting and annoying than one of his dumbass quips or declarations.
Fine.
Your funeral, Bakugo declared, readying his own stance of attack. The two gazed at each other while waiting for the signal to start the match. Let the match begin, Mike declared as Midnight waved her whip. The two rushed at each other. Kirishima charged forward with his arms still crossed in front of him, his body hardening up, while Bakugo flew into the air and toward the redhead. Just as Bakugo was about to reach and clash directly against the hardened opponent, Bakugo let out a small explosion, clouding the area in front of Kirishima with smoke as Bakugo vaulted over and above his opponent till he was behind him. Propelling him forwards, Bakugo made to launch an explosion at Shitty Hair's back. Even if it was hardened like the rest of his body, it would still be less defended and guarded than a frontal assault and allow Bakugo to test Shitty Hair's defense and reaction time fully. However, as his sparking palm made its way toward his spiky opponent, Kirishima pivoted immediately facing right at him, and his gaze locking onto him instantly. With a roar, Kirishima threw a hardened punch toward his opponent, the fist clashing against the crackling, heated palm. The two attacks met with a loud explosion. Meanwhile, when Izuku had decided to prepare for his upcoming match against Todoroki, he didn't expect the number 2 hero to come around and make him suddenly question everything Todoroki said. He was even less expectant of the enigmatic Professor Taisher to show up later, the man now sitting across from him in his waiting room. In his opinion, his Pokemon teacher was the hardest to discern of the UA teachers. It helps that many of the teachers of UA are pro-heroes that Izuku had researched and known about beforehand. Even Mizu, but Taisher was the only outlier. He didn't know anything about the Pokemon professor, even from his limited knowledge of the most well-known Pokemon professors, like the married power couple of Professors Sada and Turo, and their research of Area Zero and the terrestrial phenomenon. It didn't seem like something Mizu would do to hire a random professor to teach the most regarded and famous hero school in the world, so they must have some history. Taisher had a mysterious, enigmatic air about him, like every sentence he made had a secret hidden meaning behind it, and the way his eyes gleamed was like he was seeing a completely different world that no one knew about. He was kind mostly, and held an air of otherworldly grace about him, and despite his long, silvery platinum locks, no one could tell just how old he was given how youthful his face seemed. Izuku even heard Hagakure and Ishido compare the teacher to a mysterious, guardian angel. There was also the fact that he was quirkless, by his own admission. Izuku was shell-shocked when he first heard that, his teacher being the first quirkless person he had met, other than himself, and, technically, All Might. Despite 20% of the population being quirkless, that was the global population, meaning it was exceedingly rare to encounter someone like him, especially in Japan. While his country was home to the #1 hero and a plethora of worldwide famous heroes, quirkless discrimination was severe, and it went under the radar of the public consciousness. And it wasn't any better in other countries. Sometimes it would get so bad that most quirkless individuals are forced to move to more progressive countries like the US, who hold the greatest number of quirkless individuals, either migrated or country-born. Any idea of wanting to move there was unlikely for Izuku and his mother. His mother's work was here, and UA wasn't in America, and Izuku didn't want to go to any hero school other than here, the school All Might went to. With all these factors, Izuku never thought he would get the chance to meet another quirkless person, but then Taisher came along and changed that. In the weeks leading up to the sports festival, Izuku didn't get to know Taisher more than any other teacher. He was kind and courteous, strict and unflinching when needed, but any time Izuku thought to talk to the teacher personally, Taisher either disappeared in a blink of an eye, or a sense of dissuasion wafted over him. Like something in him knew now wasn't the time. To be honest, there were times when Izuku felt uneasy around Professor Taisher, like he could feel the Pokemon professor boring a hole into the back of his skull, but when he turned to check, Taisher was looking elsewhere, like he hadn't looked his way at all. And then there was the amulet and the card he gave him after the USJ. The amulet and the card shared a similar design, meaning it was clearly connected. The amulet was a green, sparkling jewel surrounded by a golden ring that jutted out diagonally like an X, with arches of gold connecting the left and right spikes, and all along the golden ring were 18 multicolored jewels. The types of Pokemon. Izuku had guessed after managing to gaze at them, each one representing the color that corresponded to the right type, like a rose quartz for fairy or a deep black onyx for dark type. He remembered the first time he had seen the amulet and experienced all those spontaneous and varying emotions with every jewel he focused on, but gazing at them all without any particular focus didn't seem to elicit any weird response in his head. The most striking feeling was the middle green jewel. It didn't represent any type. It was too deep a green to be grass, but not the right shade to be bug either, and both types already had gems to represent them, the emerald and the peridot. No, the gem in the middle looked more like a shining jade, but Izuku couldn't tell fully without looking deep into it, and that caused a whole other sensation. It wasn't any particular emotion like the others, no. It was deeper, resonating, almost holy, and Izuku had to forcefully tear himself away before he stared any further, like was going to sink if he looked for too long. What was all the more confusing was that the shape of the amulet and the mark of his calling card all resembled the same mark on Pikachu's tail. There was no way that was a coincidence. It was all connected, he could feel it, but Pikachu wasn't the most forthcoming when it came to his mark, or much of his past before they met. So there was only one person he could talk to about it, Taisher. Then there was the conversation they had after the USJ, when the teacher gave him his calling card, about aura. Taisha was particularly interested when he brought up the aura sphere he created, and the words he muttered were sources of inspiration he used to develop his aura force. First technique thus far, but Izuku knew there was more that he was hiding about this, and he needed to know, now more than ever, what it was. I can sense you are quite confused about a great many things, Mr. Midoriya. Taisha's voice brought Izuku back to reality. It is fairly obvious to say that this sports festival has been more stressful than you first imagined it to be. Izuku nodded, hesitantly. I can imagine, especially with your conversation with young Todoroki, Taisha brought up. Izuku's eyes widened, surprised and alarmed. How did dash? Taisha raised his palm from the table and Izuku instantly knew to clam up and pay attention. There was an aura of authority in that gesture, something that he only saw with Principal Nizu, the calming, yet strict aura of a wise and experienced teacher. I will cut straight to the chase, as I believe that you merit some time before your next match to clear your head, Taisha continued. Firstly, yes, I am aware of the conversation that took place between you and Mr. Todoroki, to which I must offer my most sincere apologies for eavesdropping on such a delicate and personal conversation. I likewise offer any condolences for Mr. Bakugo for doing much the same, though I made sure he didn't disturb your talk. Izuku's eyes only grew more surprised at the knowledge that Bakugo was also eavesdropping on him and Todoroki. At the thought of the explosive blonde, a fire started to burn inside him again, his fists clenching at his very mention. Taisha narrowed his observant eyes, a shine of blue sparkling past his storm gray eyes. The teacher fiddled with his amulet. Suddenly, the wave of anger inside Izuku was quelled, momentarily taken aback by the feeling. Recognition of what was happening flashed in his eyes as he remembered who he was supposed to be talking to, as well as shame. I am sorry, Taisha-sensei. Izuku bowed his head. I don't know what came over me there. It's quite all right, Midoriya. Taisha offered a sympathetic smile. I'd imagine that the very mention of him is rather unpleasant, given the recent circumstances. Izuku flinched, sighing tiredly. Yeah, well, me and Casey Bakugo haven't had the best relationship in the past, either, Izuku admitted half-truthfully. Thank you for keeping him from our talk. No need. Taisha waved away the thanks. Let us call it even for my own eavesdropping. However, back to the topic at hand, your talk with Todoroki seemed to have left you in a rather stressful situation. Realizing that Taisha must have overheard everything from that talk, Izuku decided there was no point in keeping it secret for Yaoyorozu's sake. Yeah, Izuku nodded once more. Momo said that the only way for us to break off this stupid engagement would be for her, or someone representing her, to win the festival. Which included you and your friend group, correct? Taisha asked. Izuku nodded, grimly, clasping his hands together. I'm the last one left that could help her out of this, Izuku revealed. I have to win the festival. For her. No one should be enslaved to such an arrangement. And I suspect that it isn't only Yaoyorozu that you believe suffers from such a fate? Taisha questioned further. Isn't he? Izuku responded, knowing full well what Taisha is referring to. Vulpix. Todoroki has such a hatred for anything relating to his father that he is even taking it out on his own Pokemon. They're supposed to be our partners, our friends, and yet Todoroki treats him like garbage for something not his fault. The thin line of Taisha's mouth perked up at one end, pleased with the boy's attitude and feelings toward Pokemon. And you wish to free Vulpix of this cruelty as much as Yaoyorozu, Taisha gathered. And yet, you know that something does not add up regarding all this, do you? Izuku nodded, bringing up a question that had been floating in the back of his mind, but didn't want to say for fear of insensitivity.
Why?
Why doesn't Vulpix just run away? Izuku asked. It's clear that Todoroki wouldn't care if Vulpix ran away, and it isn't uncommon for abused Pokemon to forcibly escape from their trainers, right? Indeed, Taisha nodded, his storm gray eyes darkening. Despite our Pokeballs being able to capture Pokemon, they can exit from them with enough willpower, and cases of runaway Pokemon are usually from escapement from trainer abuse. And from what you described, Vulpix had the means and motive to escape from his trainer at any time. So, then why? Izuku asked again. Why would he stay around someone who hates his very guts so much? Taisha remained silent, gazing deep into Izuku's eyes before replying. I sense that this bothers you more than just a Pokemon suffering under abuse, Taisha said. It would seem that you asked this question for yourself as well. Izuku blinked, taken aback by Taisha's words, but before any words could come out in reply, they died in their tracks. Izuku's eyes drifted down, darkening with sadness as he imagined his tiny 4-year-old self running after Bakugo. There is no true right answer that we might discern from such complex situations. However, in my opinion, sometimes all it boils down to would be hope, Taisha answered, Izuku lifting his eyes to meet Taisha's. Hope that the person they once were may return, or that they may grow and evolve themselves to a new state of development and growth. Sometimes, with those we are close to, hope is a veil that may cloud what is plain for others to see. Izuku frowned. The answer felt sage and true, but it felt unsatisfactory. Hope is what Izuku always strived to follow. It was hope that gave him the strength to continue pursuing to be a hero, even without a quirk, to survive all. Might's brutal training to get into UA, to get as far as he did without giving up and throwing in the towel that day on the roof. And yet, Izuku had to admit that it also made him try again and again to be friends with Bakugo, no matter how many times he showed otherwise and looked down on him like trash. But to give up hope, to just give up, it didn't sit right with Izuku. However, it is not without its merits, Taisha continued with a smile. The strength of hope, the power to persevere for so long, is also relative to the strength of heart already within. Falter it may at times, confuse and blind in others, but such strength shows the strong heart and goodness within. It is a delicate balance to hope and believe against all odds, yet not let it blind your course. It is an admirable trait, one I am rather envious of myself. A smile rose from Izuku's lips, the doubt and self-conscious thoughts peeling away. Serena's words came to him again, to know when to hope and forgive, and when to be real and concede. I get it. I shouldn't let hope blind me from what's obvious, but it doesn't mean that I should give up hoping entirely, Izuku thought. There are things worth hoping for, things worth not giving up on. It's up to me to choose and decide which to do. Izuku nodded, grateful to Taisha. Thanks for the talk, Professor, Izuku said. I think that clears up a bit, I think. Taisha smiled and nodded back. I am a teacher. It's what I am here for, Taisha replied, cheekily. Izuku chuckled lightly at the mention of his idol's words. However, as the pleasantness of the talk settled down, confusion began to well back up. Wait, Professor, I get what you mean and everything, but what does this have to do with Vulpix and Todoroki? Izuku questioned. You make it sound like Vulpix has a reason to not give up on Todoroki. Taisha's smile dropped and returned to a serious thin line. Yes, that does sound plausible, Taisha admitted. It does appear that Vulpix, despite its treatment, has reason to stay with Todoroki regardless. The strength to hold out for so long is a hope that is not without base. Izuku's eyes moved around as his thoughts worked. Thinking about himself, for example, he had to admit that he did believe that Bakugo could change, that he could be his friend back to when they were kids who would cheer for All Might on the TV or gaze at their All Might trading cards with awe. There was something there that Izuku saw in Bakugo that made him believe that he could change from what became to how he once was. Are you saying that there might have been a time when Todoroki was nice to Vulpix? Izuku questioned. Perhaps confusing and contradictory, isn't it, to what Todoroki has displayed and said, and yet there is much that contradicts, Taisha muttered, his clasped hands raised to his chin. From what I saw during your two's Pokemon battle, Vulpix was willing to follow every order from Todoroki to the letter. But that loyalty is not something that can be obtained from a lifetime of harsh treatment, and it was not out of fear. No, I sense there is more to Vulpix and Todoroki's history than we know. Perhaps even Todoroki is unaware of it himself. Are you saying that Todoroki may have just forgotten? Izuku questioned further. He did say that he doesn't remember much about that time before his mother burned his face, but he seemed pretty sure that Vulpix was given to him by his father. But then that wasn't true. And you know this how? Taisha questioned. Before you came, Endeavor showed up and asked for a favor, Izuku answered. When he was leaving, I mentioned that Todoroki hates Vulpix because he gave it to him, but Endeavor said that he never gave Todoroki Vulpix. And you believe him truthful? Taisher asked further, arching an eyebrow. He didn't have a reason to lie or defend himself, Izuku replied. But if that was the case, then someone else must have given him Vulpix. But the question is who? Taisher asked. Izuku froze, the answer arriving just then. Todoroki's mom. She could have also given him his Alolan Vulpix. Todoroki said that he barely remembers his time with his mom before the incident. It must have been before she burned his face because she would have been there to give him both and she couldn't have done that from a mental hospital. Izuku analyzed the situation. So, maybe during that time between gaining the Vulpix and the incident of his scar, Todoroki was friends with both Vulpix, not just the one. And Vulpix must be clinging on to the hope that Todoroki will return to that time he once shared friendship with it. Taisher finished Izuku's train of thought. But you sound sure that this is the truth, yet I just randomly hypothesized that. How are you certain I'm right? Izuku asked. No, not random, Taisher admitted. Not from what I've seen. What you've seen? Izuku repeated, confused. Taisher blinked, realization and embarrassment sparkling in his gray eyes. Forgive me. Now might not be the time to get into that just yet. Taisher pushed his glasses up, slightly shaking his head. No, wait please. Izuku got up from his seat. Hands slammed down onto the table in desperation. I know there's more that you are hiding. Something you aren't telling me. You know something about Aura, about me and this power I have. You made that clear after the incident at the USJ. I don't know how or why, but we are connected more than just being quirkless. So, please give me something. Tell me. Taisher's shocked look was frozen in place for a while, his mouth slightly open, a slight quiver in his eyes for a fraction of a second. Izuku suspected that this wasn't the first time he must have heard those words before. Finally, Taisher sighed deeply. So alike, he muttered, but Izuku didn't know what he meant. After a moment of clear contemplation, Taisher said, You are correct, Midoriya. There is more to me than a simple quirkless Pokemon professor. Izuku's eyes widened, unprepared for Taisher's admission. He hardened them ready to hear what he felt he needed to know. I cannot say much more than that about myself, and it is not for any act of deception toward you, but for your own safety. Taisher stared at him with a harsh seriousness in his eyes that said he would not back down on this. The festival and Todoroki should be your priority for now, and what I have to say will cloud your mind unhelpfully. I will tell you what you need to know, in time. But I have noticed that there is something about Mr. Todoroki that is more than meets the eye. Something that clouds his mind from the truth of things. Something interfering. Izuku blinked, shocked. Interfering? Do you mean that something is messing with Todoroki's mind? Like a quirk? Izuku questioned. No, not a quirk. Taisher's gazed a hard stare at Izuku. Something far more mystical. Izuku was at a loss for what Taisher meant, but before he could say anything, Taisher stood up from his chair. That is all that I will say on the matter, Taisher declared. It is not wise to go too into something speculatory, without all the information. For now, know this, Izuku Midoriya. Taisher clasped one of his hands on Izuku's shoulder, a buzzing vibration almost shooting out from his shoulder to all over his body. If you wish to help both Todoroki and Vulpix, then do whatever you must that you believe is right. This is your path to follow, and let your heart and your hope lead you down the path you need to take. Another wave of this sensation rolled around him, though this time, he felt it reach his heart and mind, and for a moment everything began to feel clearer to Izuku. His confusion felt less demanding, his anger less consuming. He felt clear. Taisher smiled and squeezed his shoulder before disengaging. Now, I believe that our talk must be on hold for now, Taisher stated. I swear that you will know the truth after the festival, but for now, may Aura be with you. Taisher turned around and left without another word, leaving Izuku silent as he contemplated all he was told. However, with Taisher, as he walked down the halls, he frowned deeply as his mind took him back to what he saw throughout the festival. From when he gazed at Midoriya and Todoroki through the walls with his clear sight, the haze of psychic residue on both Todoroki's mind and Midoriya's heart, how the latter flared upon Midoriya's anger, and the former in Todoroki's confusion. The Pokemon professor recalled seeing the same flaring throughout the two's battles, from Midoriya's outburst of aura, Todoroki's clash with Serena Mariella, and against Ochako Uraraka, especially toward the end, and right now, during Midoriya's burst of anger toward Bakugo. It was all there, those feelings of anger he felt toward Todoroki and Bakugo, but it was simply enhanced further. Only after he infused a bit of aura into Midoriya did the psychic residue subside, and with it Midoriya's emotions became clearer. What was more interesting was that the psychic residue that caused Midoriya's emotional distress was nearly the same as the psychic imprinting on Todoroki's mind. Whatever it may be, it is quite troubling, Taisher thought, disturbed. If my suspicions are correct, then it may be the preamble to calamity. Aura be with me. I pray that I am wrong.
Die.
Bakugo roared, launching another explosion. Kirishima grunted, feeling the heat and force from his side, his feet sliding a few feet back. The smoke cleared to see Kirishima and Bakugo a few yards apart, the two of them panting in different states of exhaustion. Look at that, ladies and germs. Kirishima is still holding strong after a barrage of explosions. Present Mike announced to the roar of the crowd, all now hyped from the intense matchup. Bakugo was sweating, smoke steaming from his hands while he flexed his fingers, keeping himself from flinching at the soreness of his nerves. The extent of his injuries was a few scratches, including a cut on his right cheek from one barely dodged punch from Kirishima's hardened fist, but most of his injuries were bruises that his gym uniform hid. Kirishima, on the other hand, looked worse in comparison, being the one subjected to damage more noticeably. Whatever sleeves of his uniform he had were all destroyed, as well as some of his collar. Soot marks from previous explosions littered his arms, and the most recent bit of damage was a smoking hole on his right side. The uniform blasted open to reveal the hardened skin underneath. Ugh, this fight's taking longer than expected, Bakugo thought as he studied his opponent. He's using his hardening quirk to block most of the damage of my explosions while trying to attack me with those hardened limbs. But he's wasting too much of his energy trying to keep his whole body hardened up. Instead, he's only hardening the parts he needs to defend and attack. Bakugo noticed how Shitty Hair's left arm was unhardened in comparison to the right side. His right faced more toward him. He's trying to finish the fight quickly, because he can't keep it up forever. Bakugo let out a snarling smile. I just needed to keep hammering more and more explosions until Shitty Hair has no strength left. Why? Bakugo's smile dropped as Kirishima began to speak up, his left hand over his open right side. Why did you do it? Huh? Talking now after being mute all this time? Bakugo barked in reply, raising his arms, threatening to advance. Finally hardened up some balls on you? Why did you do that to her? Kirishima asked out louder, ceasing the mini explosions in Bakugo's hands as he stared at the faux redhead in surprise. Over to the side, Midnight perked up, narrowing her eyes at the sudden question, with Aizawa and Nizu, respectively, preparing to listen in closely. You knew what she meant to me. You knew how the two of us were best friends. She helped us win the second event of the festival. Kirishima's right fist shook as he clenched it hard. I know this is a tournament, and we got to give it our all to win. I know some of us would get hurt, but not like that. What are you crying about? Bakugo growled out, starting to get annoyed with this sudden chit-chat during their fight. Quit blabbing and come and fight me. Why? Why did you hurt Mina like that, huh? Kirishima yelled out, tears brimming around his eyes. Bakugo blinked in surprise. You could have just blasted her out of the ring. You could have done that at any time at the end, but you purposefully held her inside so you could keep attacking, Kirishima explained, remembering during the fight. Even though he wanted to look away, he noticed how when Mina looked close to stumbling or flying out the field, Bakugo was quick to keep her inside and continue his onslaught. You didn't have to go that far, but you did. You knew she was my friend, man, and you did that to her anyway. So why? The field was silent, Bakugo's eyes hidden behind the shadow of his hair while Kirishima panted after his rant, expecting an answer. He would finally get it a second later. She didn't matter. Kirishima's eyes widened, his mouth dropping as he took note of what Bakugo said as the blonde lifted his head, showing his hateful red eyes. It didn't matter who she was to you or anyone. She was in my way from winning this stupid festival. But then she had to open her big fucking mouth and stick her business where it doesn't belong. So I taught her a lesson to make sure to never get in my way ever again. That's that. Kirishima's sharp teeth mashed together in a snarl. And that business involved you and Midoriya. Huh, is that it? Kirishima questioned further. I only know one kind of person that would make Mina so angry like that. Did you bully Midoriya? Why does hell does any of this matter? Bakugo snapped, even further hate filling his eyes, red cracking lines appearing around the white of his eyes, his veins bulging. Deka doesn't fucking matter. He never did and never should be. He was just an annoying-ass bug that wouldn't leave me alone, clinging to me like a goddamn joltic. I was in my right to make sure that shitty-ass nerd knew his place as the quirkless loser that he is. He's a goddamn embarrassment to Auntie Inko and Uncle Hisashi. He never should have gotten into this school. But suddenly, all you shitty extras want to suck his dick and prop him up like he's a protagonist of some shitty anime.
He's not the hero of his story.
I am. And I'm not going to let him or anyone else ruin my destiny to become the #1 hero. Kirishima was as still as a statue, the wind blowing past him audibly. Midnight looked at Bakugo with absolute disgust, while Aizawa gazed down with such anger that his quirk was inching to activate. Mizu looked down at the snarling blonde with cold, dead black eyes, his stoic face betraying nothing, yet his stuck-out tail was a different matter. Jiro managed to overhear everything, and she wanted to screw all the rules and everything to go down and fire her heartbeat so loud into that bastard's ear that he'd be paralyzed for a week. Why you? Kirishima's fist shook violently, hardening once more. You wanted to get strong. Huh, shitty hair? That's why you've been pawing around me for so long, right? Bakugo raised his arms. Then forget about those weaklings and focus on yourself. Do whatever it takes to get stronger. Leave no room for doubt that you're the superior fighter. That's what it means to be #1. To be stronger than everybody and always win. You unmanly bastard. Kirishima roared, tears sprinkling from his eyes, his whole body hardened and rushing toward Bakugo. Bakugo blasted out to meet him, firing another barrage of explosions, hoping to blast the last of Kirishima's hardening away, only for the enraged redhead to roar out of the smoke, slightly startling Bakugo at the look of his pure white raging eyes. Kirishima roared as he landed a hardened fist straight at Bakugo's nose, instantly breaking it, blood shooting out. Kirishima lands a major nose-breaking punch. Present Mike declared as the crowd roared again, unknowing of what was said or revealed down below. Bakugo snarled as he recovered, countering with another series of explosions. However, Kirishima didn't let up. The enraged redhead pushed on forward, ignoring the strain of his quirk and the explosions to continue his assault, launching one powerful, hardened punch after another onto Bakugo's body. Winning didn't even seem to be a priority in Kirishima's mind, just revenge. Revenge for Mina, revenge for Midoriya, revenge against his own idiot self for believing and following this sack of shit. Bakugo reared his head back from a vicious left hook across his face, the right side of his face, near his eye beginning to swell. The acknowledgement that he was getting hurt enraged Bakugo further. That is it. Bakugo growled, throwing caution to the wind. He wants to end this fight as quickly as possible.
Fine.
I'll show him what real power is. Make him pay. Show his unmanly ass that he is the one who shouldn't be here. Kirishima repeated in his mind as he launched blow after blow. Like Shiozaki said, do whatever you can to make things right to them. And make sure this bastard can't hurt them ever again. Reaga. Kirishima roared as he fired a right hook at Bakugo, only for the blonde to duck at the last second and fire a powerful explosion right in Kirishima's face. Bakugo is counterattacking, Mike explained. That last second feint. Hagakure gasped, recognizing the move. Serena frowned as she saw it too. Aizu, Serena thought, recalling the beginning of the battle training exercise, Deka ducking under Bakugo's right attack and slamming him to the ground. He's mimicking Aizu's moves.
Die.
Bakugo roared, firing explosion after explosion without end, covering the entire field in front of him with smoke and covering Kirishima, who was forced to defend against the ceaseless, stronger explosions, slowly getting pushed back, further and further.
Die, 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 die.
Bakugo smashed both hands onto Kirishima's chest and fired another explosion with both, sending Kirishima sliding back and sending himself backward. As Kirishima slid to a stop, he looked up to see Bakugo stopping his momentum and flying towards him. Suddenly, Bakugo began spinning around like a corkscrew, rapidly gathering speed as his explosion kept him flying toward him. Bakugo reached him with a snarling, vicious face. Howitzer impact. Bakugo roared. Crack-a-boom. A loud boom rocked the stadium as a massive explosion covered the whole field in explosions and flames, Bakugo almost floating there in slow motion with a large maniac grin on his bloody and bruised face. Kirishima's body flew back, eyes pure white and mouth agape as consciousness escaped him. What in the dash? Bakugo just launched his biggest explosion yet and covered the entire left side of the field. Is it over? Mike questioned. Midnight waited for the large amount of smoke to clear, narrowing her eyes through the heat and fumes. As it finally cleared, the left side of the field was in complete shambles, Bakugo standing just in front of the blast radius, panting, slouched with an insane, open-mouthed smile. Midnight would be forgiven for mistaking him for a bloodthirsty beast. As she looked further out in the destroyed field, lying half-embedded into the wall of the stadium and missing his entire shirt and some of his pants, thankfully for him, his crotch area was still intact. Kirishima was motionless as his eyes were pure white. Kirishima is unable to continue and out of bounds. Midnight was quick to call it, immediately calling in the medical bots. She cringed as she was forced to continue. Bakugo advances. Holy Arceus, folks. Bakugo comes ahead with a last-minute counterattack and wins the round. Ain't that quite the explosive finish for the last of the second round of matches? Mike declared, the audience roaring in cheers. Holy shit, Kaminari exclaimed, fingers still plugged into his ears from the explosion, his face completely frightened. The hell was that last attack? Bakugo used the gathered momentum of his spinning to gather up more oxygen, fueling his last explosion to such proportions. Momo explained, her own face paling at the strength of their classmate. And Izuku might have to fight him? Serena's knuckles cracked at how hard they clenched. If looks could kill, Bakugo would have been in 1,000 pieces like the field. What really made her so mad was the cheers of the crowd, also hyped up by the massive spectacle that they forgot about how some of them rightly jeered and booed at him at the beginning of the match. Did they all forget what he did to Mina already? Or worry that he might have killed Kirishima? Serena saw the unconscious redhead being taken away by the medical bots. She saw how viciously he fought at the end, almost like Mina. Did whatever caused Mina to snap like that also happen to Kirishima? Serena pondered. Did Bakugo say something to make them both attack them like that? Did they find out about who he really is? Kyoko was glad she had the foresight to fully tone out as much of her hearing with the earbuds as she could. That final explosion surely would have made her deaf by how loud it was. That happiness was short-lived as the results of the match became clear to her, and she sent a look of sympathy toward Kirishima as he was taken inside. She then saw how Bakugo refused to be taken in by the bots and stubbornly began walking himself to Recovery Girl's room. Her sneer was livid as she heard everything that Bakugo said to Kirishima and all he said about Midoriya. She didn't know if there was any person she had hated more already than the blonde, cause he was number one alright. Number one on her shit list. Meanwhile, watching the spectacle from his screen, Nightai smirked, impressed by the skills and power of the Bakugo boy, especially his final technique, clearly seeing how intelligent and resourceful the boy was with his quirk. Raw, unbridled talent. If Miria wasn't already the clear perfect successor for Tashinori and One for All, then this boy would have been a close second. Nightai thought, only further disturbed by how Tashinori could have chosen such a weak, quirkless boy as his successor instead of such powerful talents like the Bakugo and Todoroki boys, or even Miria. Also, meanwhile, Shigaraki stared at the screen, lifting his uninjured hand and scratching his chin in thought, his thoughts mostly centered on how promising the boy was. As for the man in the chair and his cloaked companion, they too watched the spectacle with amusement. Such a powerful quirk. The man in the chair thought greedily. His cloaked companion let out a snort of amusement at the boy's level of anger and viciousness, first with the pink girl and now with the redhead. Amusing, he thought. Ultimately pitiful and lacking the true gift, but amusing nonetheless. All might look down concerned for Kirishima's health, almost having flashbacks of Bakuga's max blast burn during the battle training exercise. Hopefully, Recovery Girl can get the boy up to a speedy recovery, or at least Tashinori hoped she would. He worried that with how fiercely he fought and the yield of the explosion that ultimately knocked the boy out, he might not have any stamina left for the old nurse to use to heal him up. Izuku's Pokemon all glared at the retreating figure of the one who caused their trainer such pain for most of his life. Eevee's glare was usually a mixture of genuine hatred toward Bakugo, mixed with sadness and pity. Of the four, he was the only one who saw the actual friendship between Bakugo and Izuku in person rather than hear about it, and he was even friends of sorts with Bakugo's Cyndaquil at the time. But he was likewise there to see the fallout of their friendship firsthand. He was there to see it all go wrong, and Izuku had no fault whatsoever for it, but it was always sad for Eevee to see how Bakugo turned out. He may not have been perfect when he was little. If anything, he was still a bit of a brat. But that little boy held the same fire and enthusiasm for heroes, especially for All Might, that Izuku had. Eevee often wondered what truly separated the two former friends and how they took such similar yet conflicting paths. Was Izuku humbler because of his lesser family life, while Bakuga's perfect one made him spoiled? Maybe their Pokemon and their support pushed them along to who they were. The answer Eevee usually found the simplest, if not a bit anticlimactic, was that Izuku and Bakugo were just the way they were, and, in the end, it didn't matter what or who influenced them. They chose their paths. It was only sad that the boy-turned-bully had chosen his with little remorse. As Present Mike announced a break time for repairs to the field, Izuku's Pokemon remembered what match was up next, and how it might be the most important match of the entire festival. The four were mentally present for Izuku's talks with both Endeavor and Professor Taisher, overhearing everything they said and revealed, yet said not a word to allow their trainer privacy with his thoughts. Ultimately, they all knew exactly what Izuku was planning to do, and despite reservations from some, i.e. Pikachu and Froakie, they would support what Izuku did, and chastise the living Arceus out of him when it was all over. Or, at least Combusken will. Footsteps echoed down the dark hallway from Izuku's red shoes, striding slowly, as if the world itself had slowed, toward the bright light at the end of the tunnel, toward the field, into the ring, and ultimately, to what could be his final opponent. And so, I declared war on you, targeted you, to show my old man that I could win without his fire quirk. The image of Todoroki's scarred face popped into his mind. I'm going to win this tournament using only my left side. Izuku's frown was deep and contemplative. Make him show his true potential before he ruins himself. Endeavor's request repeated. I don't want to do him any favors. He doesn't deserve my help to fix his mistakes, Izuku thought. But if I don't, no one else will, or can. On the other side of the stadium, Todoroki likewise walked down his hallway, fully refreshed in body, but not so much in spirit. What do you mean his Pokemon? Todoroki remembered Izuku's words as well as that worrying face of his that irked him. Do you mean your Vulpix? Isn't he your Pokemon? Todoroki's mouth opened to see his teeth mashed together, letting out a frustrated snarl. Even Todoroki himself couldn't figure out why those words bothered him so much, why his head throbbed in pain, or why everyone, Midoriya, even his own Pokemon, can't see the burden that Todoroki shook his head.
Why?
Why can't I even bother calling him that anymore? Todoroki cursed himself, wondering where this hesitance to call Vulpix a runt suddenly came from. Why he suddenly feels like he cares for the Pokemon. He shouldn't. He doesn't. He couldn't. He was tossed onto me by my father. A fire Pokemon to go well with my ice one. Both Midoriya and Todoroki remember the latter's words. Nothing but a burden cast onto me. And yet Midoriya knows that might not be true. I did not gift him his Vulpix. And Vulpix must be clinging onto the hope that Todoroki will return to that time he once shared friendship with it. So many people in pain, hurting. Izuku's fists clenched, remembering the feeling of sadness from Vulpix's Pokeball. My father arranged another quirk marriage, this time between myself and Yaoyorozu. They said that if I, or anyone of my choosing or representation, won the sports festival, then I could annul this engagement and choose whoever pleases me. The memory of Yaoyorozu's tearful face after her defeat pained his heart. I'm so sorry, Izuku. I did so much to you, and it was all for nothing. No, it wasn't for nothing, Izuku declared, eyes blazing with lightning and a blue light. I won't let it. I refuse to let all their pain be for nothing. You are stronger than your siblings. You can achieve what we could not, but only if you use your full potential. Do you think this is what your mother wanted for you? Like you would know or care? A cold fire burned Todoroki's eyes, that only burned hotter, and throbbing at the fleeting image of a white-haired woman smiling. I will win this for her, and show that you don't control me. I'm going to win for them. Izuku imagined all his Pokemon. Eevee, Pikachu, Combusken, Froakie, all who stood beside him through thick and thin. He imagined his mother who supported him, and All Might who believed in him. He imagined Serena, Ida, Kaminari, Ajui, Hagakure, Kirishima, and Tokoyami. He imagined all those who were hurting from this festival. Momo, Vulpix, Nina, Ochako, Ojiro, and Aoyama. He won't let their pain be for nothing. I'm going to win for them. Todoroki imagined his eldest brother, Tuya, the first victim of his father's madness, lost and forever out of reach. He imagined his sister, Fuyumi, ever loyal, loving, and sweet, forced to act like the mother their mother should have been. He imagined Natsuo, his brother, empathetic of his plight and supportive to the very end. Despite their recent mutiny, he still thought of his Pokemon, Ninetales, Darmanitan, and Drizzle. He imagined his mother, somewhere out there, alone, scarred, helpless. Maybe she was watching him right now. He won't let their sacrifices be for nothing. Izuku and Todoroki glared out as the light of the outside world bathed their faces. And I won't let him stand in my way. Well, here it is, folks. The semifinals. And with it only 4 promising young future heroes to go. President Mike announced, the monitors displaying the images of Todoroki, Izuku, Tokoyami, and Bakugo, the former 2 to face each other as the latter 2 were. The crowd roared as the first 2 made their way out of the tunnels and toward the field. Only 2 more matches till the final showdown, and we're starting with the brawl between the cold and bold. Miruko and Ryukyu watched from atop, the latter smiling amusedly from witnessing the obvious, foot-thumping excitement from the former. Night Eye glared hatefully at his screen, and the green-haired thief unworthy of his idol's gift. Alexa would start to go on a frenzy photographing the 2 kids, especially after the major feats of power they have shown. From afar, Cynthia gazed at her TV screen calculatedly, especially regarding the green one, the boy who displayed that long, ancient power wrapped in delightful, haunting mystery. Cynthia raised her glass of water, waiting for the show to begin. In the right corner, we have the guy who won his last fight in a landslide and literally left half of the audience frozen. Mike announced as the scarred boy made his way up the steps. From the 1A hero course, it's Shoto Todoroki. In a lavish, traditional Japanese home, a young woman with shoulder-length white hair with crimson-red streaks and a young man with spiky, white hair gazed at the screen. Lying beside them were a Glacian and an Alolan Sandslash. The 2 young adults wished the best of luck to their youngest brother. From atop the stands, Endeavor looked down, arms crossed, with a calculating, stoic gaze masked partially by his flaming mask. The number 2 hero hoped the assumed heir of All Might would follow his request and for his son to free himself from his self-made prison. Taishir and Nizu watched from above, the 2 curious to see how this matchup would go, with the former's eyes glowing blue, frowning as he could still see the psychic imprint on the Todoroki boy's mind. From the nurse's office, getting freshly checked out for his injuries, Bakugo glared sideways at the TV screen, wondering which of these thorns in his side he would have the pleasure of eating in the finals. His hateful glare intensified as he looked at icy Hot's opponent. And in the left corner, he's everyone's favorite class rep who just won't stop till he's the best that no one ever was. Mike introduced Izuku as he walked up to the field. Also, from the 1A hero course, it's Izuku Midoriya. Inko clasped her hands, worried for her baby boy who would be facing the one who could summon a glacier in a second. Mitsuki rubbed Inko's shoulders for support, and very likely for warmth soon enough. All across the different stands for the students, different students from different courses cheered for the green-haired boy. Mineta jumped and cheered loudly for Midoriya, while Shinso did so more silently. Hatsum looked up from her inventions for once to eye every detail of her future husband's fighting style. Setsuna grinned wide, her eyes blazing with curiosity at her green-haired comrade who tickled her interest since the first event. Mirio and Tamaki rooted for the boy, but Nijire completely overshadowed them with how bubbly and excited she was to see her chosen Kohei. From afar, Riley gazed with interest, his eyes blazing blue to see what more surprises this chosen one had in store for him, while Riola jumped and cheered like he had known the boy his whole life. All Might watched from the teacher's stands, struggling to keep his nerves in check and his skinny arms still. You already come so far, young Midoriya, All Might thought. You proved your strength and your promise enough already. I would say that you don't have to win, but I can see that fire in your eyes. Losing is not an option for you. And if so, make sure to go beyond and secure the win at any cost. Wish me luck, guys. Izuku sent out mentally toward his Pokemon. He was glad to find that even with Mick's loud voice on the projector, he could hear the verbal cheers of his friends and Pokemon as much as he could the latter mentally. The greatest of blessings and luck to you, Master. Froke croaked. Stay safe and win this, Izuku. Combuskin chirped. Yeah, beat that candy cane-haired ass, boss. Pikachu roared, his Deku-inspired Lucha on full display. Show him you don't best with our crew. Go beyond, Izuku. Eevee cheered with all his heart.
We believe in you.
Always. But most importantly, without knowing why or how, Izuku could feel the cheers from the girls. Go win this, easy. Go show him who's the best of the best. Hagakure cheered. We know you can do this, Zu. Beat him and win. Ribbit, Tsu croaked. I know you got this, Deka Clink. We're all counting on you, Ochako exclaimed. Izuku, I have asked you for so much and deserve very little for it. Momo's sad yet supportive voice spoke to him. But please, win this, my knight in shining armor, and come back to me. Win, for us, Aizu, for everyone, Serena said, her voice and all the others carried to him like a hand on his shoulder. Show him what it means to go plus ultra. Izuku placed a hand over his shoulder, grasping at their prayers. I will, he whispered back. Well, let's not keep ourselves waiting, everybody. Mick's voice brought him back to the present. Izuku shifted his determined gaze out toward Todoroki's cold, hard glare. It's the first match of the semifinals. A cold mist began to spread from Todoroki. Green lightning sparked around Izuku's body, down his arm to his clenched fist. And it begins now. Meanwhile, inside Todoroki's waiting room, Alola Ninetales, Britannian Darmanitan, and Drizzle all watched the screen with gripped, anxious expressions, their worry for their trainer reaching a zenith. Despite his poor decisions, he is still their trainer, and to see him in such self-inflicted pain at that was weighing on their hearts and souls. Just as the fight began, the lone pokeball on a bench shook, again and again. Finally, it snapped itself open and